Here we see the ancient land of Canaan, positioned at the crossroads of three continents. This strategic location between Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia made this region crucial for trade and cultural exchange throughout history. The Mediterranean coastline displays Phoenician settlements that developed the first alphabet system. The ancient city of Jericho, represented with its defensive walls, stands as one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities, dating back 11,000 years. According to biblical tradition, Abraham migrated from Mesopotamia to Canaan around 2000 BCE, establishing the foundation of Hebrew civilization. The model traces his journey and the covenant that promised this land to his descendants. The scene shows the period when Jacob's family, later known as Israel, moved to Egypt during a severe famine. Joseph, one of Jacob's sons, had risen to prominence in the Egyptian court and facilitated this migration that would last for centuries. The exodus from Egypt, traditionally dated to the 13th century BCE, marks a pivotal moment in Hebrew history. Here we observe Moses leading the Israelites through the wilderness, receiving the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, the foundation of Jewish law. The period concludes with the settlement phase, when the 12 tribes established themselves throughout Canaan under leaders called judges. This decentralized system of governance preceded the establishment of a unified monarchy. Archaeological evidence supports some aspects of this early history, while other elements remain matters of religious tradition and ongoing scholarly debate. This foundational period established the narratives that would shape Jewish identity for millennia to come. This section presents the United Kingdom of Israel, established around 1020 BCE, when the 12 tribes unified under King Saul to defend against persistent Philistine threats from the coastal regions. The display shows King David's rise to power around 1000 BCE. After his victory over the Philistine champion Goliath, David eventually became king and established Jerusalem as the political and religious capital. His military campaign significantly expanded Israeli territory. Jerusalem appears as it developed under David and his son Solomon. Solomon's temple, completed around 957 BCE, became the central place of worship for the Hebrew people. The structure demonstrates the architectural achievement and religious significance of this period. Solomon's reign from 970 to 931 BCE marked the kingdom's golden age. The scene illustrates major building projects, including the temple, royal palaces, and fortification systems. Trade relationships extended from Egypt to Mesopotamia, bringing unprecedented prosperity. However, Solomon's heavy taxation and forced labor created deep internal tensions. After his death, the kingdom permanently split into two separate states, Israel in the north with 10 tribes, and Judah in the south with 2 tribes. The northern kingdom of Israel, with its capital at Samaria, lasted until 722 BCE, when it fell to the expanding Assyrian Empire. The 10 northern tribes were deported across the Assyrian territories and became known as the Lost Tribes of Israel. The southern kingdom of Judah survived longer, but eventually fell to Babylon in 586 BCE. The scene depicts the destruction of Solomon's temple and the beginning of the Babylonian exile, a traumatic event that fundamentally transformed Jewish history and religious practice. This monarchical period established Jerusalem's central role in Jewish consciousness and created the political traditions that would influence Jewish thought throughout subsequent history. The scene opens with the Babylonian exile period, beginning in 586 BCE, when Nebuchadnezzar II destroyed Jerusalem and deported much of Judah's population to Babylon in multiple waves of forced migration. Jewish communities in Babylon adapted to life in diaspora while maintaining their religious identity through new forms of worship and study. Prophets like Ezekiel and Jeremiah provided spiritual leadership during this challenging period of displacement. In 539 BCE, the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon and implemented a revolutionary policy of religious tolerance. The display shows Cyrus's decree allowing exiled peoples to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. The return to Zion began immediately after the Persian conquest. Groups of Jewish exiles made the arduous journey back to Jerusalem, led by figures like Zerubbabel, a descendant of the Davidic royal line who carried both political and religious authority. Construction of the Second Temple began in 516 BCE, though it lacked the elaborate decoration of Solomon's original structure. The builders faced significant challenges, including opposition from neighboring peoples and limited resources compared to the First Temple period. Ezra the scribe arrived from Babylon around 458 BCE with additional returnees and a specific mission to re-establish Jewish law. The scene shows Ezra reading the Torah to the assembled people in Jerusalem, marking the canonization of Jewish scripture. This period witnessed the development of synagogues as local centers of worship and study, making Judaism less dependent on the central temple in Jerusalem. These institutions would prove crucial for Jewish survival in later centuries. The Great Assembly, comprised of 120 religious leaders, was established to codify Jewish law and religious practice. Their scholarly work laid the foundation for rabbinic Judaism and helped preserve Jewish identity across diverse geographical locations. The arrival of Alexander the Great in 332 BCE initiated the Hellenistic period in Jewish history. Greek culture, language, and philosophical ideas began influencing local populations throughout the former Persian Empire territories. After Alexander's death, his empire was divided among his generals. Judea initially fell under Ptolemaic control from Egypt, then passed to the Seleucid Empire based in Syria around 200 BCE, creating new political dynamics and cultural pressures. The scene illustrates the cultural tension between traditional Jewish practices and Hellenistic influences. Some Jews adopted Greek customs, language, and educational methods, while others maintained strict adherence to ancestral traditions, creating internal community divisions. The crisis intensified under Seleucid King Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who banned Jewish religious practices in 167 BCE. The display shows the temple's desecration, where pagan sacrifices were offered to Zeus, violating fundamental Jewish religious principles. The Maccabean revolt began in the village of Modian, when the priest Mattathias refused to perform pagan sacrifices as ordered by Seleucid authorities. This act of religious defiance sparked a widespread rebellion that would last several years. Judah Maccabee, Mattathias' son, led the revolt using effective guerrilla warfare tactics against the larger, more conventional Seleucid forces. The scene demonstrates key battles, including the decisive victory at Beth Zur in 164 BCE, the recapture and rededication of the temple in 164 BCE established the festival of Hanukkah, commemorating both military victory and religious restoration. The celebration of the oil that burned for 8 days became a central Jewish holiday. The Hasmonean dynasty, established by the Maccabee family, ruled an independent Jewish state for approximately 1 century. This period saw territorial expansion and renewed Jewish sovereignty, though internal conflicts gradually weakened Hasmonean authority. Roman involvement began with Pompey's conquest of Jerusalem in 63 BCE, establishing Roman control over Judea. Initially, Rome ruled through client kings like Herod the Great, who maintained Jewish religious practices while serving Roman political interests. Herod's reign from 37 to 4 BCE brought massive construction projects, including the expansion of the Second Temple complex into one of the ancient world's most impressive religious structures. His building programs extended throughout the region, creating lasting architectural monuments. Direct Roman rule began in 6 CE, when Judea became a Roman province under a series of governors. Growing tensions between Jewish religious practices and Roman administrative demands, including taxation systems and census requirements, created increasing instability. The First Jewish-Roman War erupted in 66 CE due to accumulated religious conflicts and economic grievances. Initial Jewish victories demonstrated effective resistance, but Roman legions under Vespasian and later Titus systematically reconquered rebel territories. The siege of Jerusalem lasted from 70 CE until the city's fall. The destruction of the Second Temple ended the Second Temple period and fundamentally changed Jewish religious practice, shifting emphasis from temple sacrifice to Torah study and prayer. Following the temple's destruction, Jewish communities dispersed throughout the Roman Empire in what became known as the Great Diaspora. New centers of Jewish learning developed in places like Yavne, where Rabbinic Judaism took its foundational form. The Bar Kokhba revolt of 132 to 135 CE represented the final attempt at Jewish independence in antiquity. This last rebellion was brutally suppressed by Emperor Hadrian, who implemented harsh anti-Jewish policies throughout the province. After the revolt's failure, Hadrian renamed Judea Syria Palestina and banned Jews from Jerusalem for several centuries. This marked the beginning of a diaspora that would last nearly 1,800 years, fundamentally shaping Jewish identity and religious development. Early Jewish communities in Babylon continued scholarly traditions that produced the Babylonian Talmud between 200 and 500 CE. This comprehensive legal and ethical commentary became central to Jewish religious and civil law throughout the diaspora. Medieval Spain under Muslim rule provided Jewish communities with a remarkable golden age from 900 to 1200 CE. Centers of learning flourished where Jewish scholars like Maimonides made significant contributions to philosophy, medicine, and Jewish legal interpretation. The Crusades, beginning in 1096 CE, brought severe persecution to European Jewish communities. Attacks on Jewish populations in the Rhineland and economic restrictions throughout medieval Europe demonstrated the precarious nature of Jewish existence. European ghettos, beginning with Venice in 1516, created segregated living areas that restricted Jewish movement and economic activity. However, these communities also helped preserve Jewish culture, religious practice, and internal self-governance systems. The Spanish Inquisition of 1478 and the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492 scattered Sephardic communities across the Mediterranean. These population movements created new settlement patterns and cultural exchanges throughout the region. Eastern European Jewish communities, particularly in Poland, Lithuania, became the largest concentration of world Jewry by the 17th century. These areas developed distinctive cultural practices, religious institutions, and economic specializations. Despite persistent persecution, Jewish communities maintained their traditions, developed new forms of religious expression, and made significant contributions to European intellectual and economic life throughout this extended period of exile. The rise of modern Zionism emerged as a response to 19th century European anti-Semitism and the challenges facing Jewish communities despite legal emancipation in many countries. Pogroms in the Russian Empire, particularly after 1881, drove hundreds of thousands of Jews to emigrate from their traditional communities. These violent attacks convinced many Jewish intellectuals that Jews needed their own political homeland for physical security. Theodor Herzl's conversion to Zionism following the Dreyfus Affair in France marked a turning point. The First Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland in 1897 established the World Zionist Organization with the goal of creating a Jewish state. The first Aliyah brought approximately 35,000 Jewish immigrants to Ottoman Palestine. Early agricultural settlements like Rishon LeZion and Petah Tikva were established, funded largely by Baron Edmund de Rothschild's philanthropic investments. World War I fundamentally transformed Middle Eastern politics. British forces conquered Palestine from the Ottoman Empire, and the Balfour Declaration of 1917 promised British support for establishing a Jewish national home in Palestine. The British Mandate period witnessed continued Jewish immigration alongside growing Arab-Jewish tensions over land ownership, political control, and the ultimate future of Palestine. The city of Tel Aviv developed as a modern Hebrew urban center. Nazi persecution in Europe dramatically accelerated Jewish immigration to Palestine during the 1930s. However, British immigration restrictions under the 1939 White Paper created a tragic contradiction between Jewish desperation and limited legal entry opportunities. The Holocaust devastated European Jewry, killing 6 million people and destroying centuries-old communities across the continent. This unprecedented genocide strengthened international arguments for Jewish statehood and influenced post-war diplomatic decisions. The UN Partition Plan of 1947 proposed dividing Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Jewish acceptance and Arab rejection of this proposal set the stage for the armed conflict that would accompany Israeli independence. David Ben-Gurion's Declaration of Israeli Independence on May 14, 1948, ended the British Mandate and established the State of Israel, fulfilling nearly 2 millennia of Jewish hopes for restored sovereignty in their ancestral homeland. The immediate Arab-Israeli War of 1948 to 1949 involved armies from 5 Arab states attacking the newly declared state. Israel not only survived this existential challenge, but expanded beyond the original UN partition boundaries, establishing armistice lines with neighboring countries. The war created approximately 750,000 Palestinian Arab refugees who fled or were expelled from their homes during the conflict. Refugee camps established in neighboring Arab countries created a lasting humanitarian crisis and political problem that continues today. Mass immigration between 1948 and 1951 doubled Israel's population as Jewish refugees arrived from Europe and Arab countries. Absorption centers were established to house and integrate these diverse immigrant populations into Israeli society and economy. The 1956 Suez Crisis involved Israeli military cooperation with Britain and France against Egyptian President Nasser. Israel's rapid conquest of the Sinai Peninsula demonstrated military capabilities, though international pressure forced complete withdrawal from occupied territories. The Six-Day War of 1967 fundamentally altered the regional balance of power. Israel's preemptive strike against Arab air forces and subsequent capture of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights tripled the territory under Israeli control. The reunification of Jerusalem allowed Jewish access to holy sites for the first time since 1948, creating profound emotional and religious significance for Israeli national consciousness and Jewish communities worldwide. However, territorial gains created new challenges, including governing over 1 million Palestinian Arabs in occupied territories. Settlement activity began immediately, and Palestinian resistance movements emerged to oppose Israeli occupation. The 1973 Yom Kippur War caught Israel unprepared when Egypt and Syria launched coordinated surprise attacks on Judaism's holiest day. Despite initial Arab military successes, Israel recovered with significant American military support. Though the war shattered assumptions about Israeli invincibility, the 1978 Camp David Accords, mediated by President Carter, established peace between Israel and Egypt through a land for peace formula. Israel's complete withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula in exchange for Egyptian recognition created the first Arab-Israeli peace agreement. The 1982 Lebanon War aimed to eliminate PLO military bases, but resulted in an 18-year Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon. This controversial conflict demonstrated the complexity of regional politics and led to the emergence of Hezbollah as a new militant threat. The First Intifada, 1987 to 1993, marked the beginning of sustained Palestinian civil uprising in the occupied territories. Stone-throwing youth became symbols of resistance, while Israeli security responses highlighted the moral and practical challenges of military occupation. The 1993 Oslo Accords represented the first direct agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. The historic agreement established Palestinian autonomy in parts of the West Bank and Gaza, raising hopes for a comprehensive peace settlement. The peace process gradually collapsed amid continued violence, settlement expansion, and political assassinations, including that of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995. The Second Intifada, from 2000 to 2005, brought unprecedented levels of terrorism and military response. Israel's economic transformation into startup nation occurred through investment in education, research and development, and military technologies with civilian applications. Major international technology companies established research facilities throughout the country. Military innovations, including the Iron Dome missile defense system, demonstrate how security needs drive technological advancement. Israeli companies have become global leaders in cybersecurity, water technology, and agricultural innovation. Recent regional developments include the Abraham Accords, normalizing relations with several Arab states, creating new diplomatic and economic opportunities. However, Israel continues facing threats from Iran's nuclear program and proxy organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas. Contemporary Israel functions as the Middle East's only stable democracy, while managing ongoing internal challenges including economic inequality, religious secular tensions, and the unresolved Palestinian question that remains central to regional stability and international diplomacy.